Hello, it's Ernesto. When you're at the beginning of a project, what do? Perhaps you get immediately inspired, put together a template, and then get to work. Or you take a few days thinking about it, and then get to work then. Or maybe you shamelessly procrastinate and don't put in the work until the very last moment when there really is no time left to waste. Either way, you have to get the work finished. You don't want to be the person who misses deadlines. Seriously, you don't want to be that person. But the profession of media composition is, for many, a mysterious vocation. So you might come into it a little unsure of what the process is like. There are so many things to juggle and oh so little time. So how do I do it? I made myself a template in an app called Notion. Notion is a software where you can build pretty much whatever you want. You can use it to manage projects or build wikis. I use it as the former, to manage my projects. The beauty of Notion is that when you make a new page, it's completely empty and you can add the blocks that you want. The downside to Notion is that if you're a beginner, you have absolutely no idea where to start unless you have an idea what you want to build. If you would like access to the template that I showed today that I use to organize my own projects, then it's available over at Patreon at patreon.com/Ernesto Composer. You get access to this template and other templates that I use in my own pro work, as well as score study versions of my published works and score study Sunday hangouts and more cool goodies. So how does it work? Let me show you the template now. So this is my scoring project template. It's divided into a few different sections. At the top here, I have what I call my project timeline. At the bottom here in the main view, these are where all of my cues live, how I keep track of everything, including their status and other relevant information. I calculate how much has been done and how much is yet to be done down here. And on the side here, I have several things associated with the project that I need to keep. The purpose of this Notion template is to house everything that isn't music that is associated with the project. My focus for today, though, is going to be on this top section here, the project timeline. So how should you organize your time? The way that I tend to do it is I plot down here when everything has to be done by. So let's just say that this has to be done by August 28. Now, I have a pre-associated page for each of these that I tend to do. I might not do each of these for each project, but they're there if I find that it's relevant for what I'm doing. So, say delivery has to be on August 28th. I'll add a little thing there. And say I've been talking to the production team over the course of this time. So this is pre-production conversations. And then next, maybe I'll be making a musical diary. A musical diary is what I call the sort of suite that I write at the beginning of each project. It starts off with my orchestral template, again, available at patreon.com/Ernesto Composer. And the purpose of this musical diary is to write down ideas that I have for themes, for story elements and beats, to put down the sort of color palette and sonic palette that I have in my head that will be a part of this project over the course of its entirety. After I make the musical diary, I will duplicate it, get rid of all the music that I have, and all of the sounds that I use will still be in there. From that, I duplicate it to make each individual cue so that I have the sounds that I'm using throughout the course of the project. Maybe I'm done making the musical diary. I might show it to the team, I might not. I will spend time composing. Let me change the view here to be monthly, so we're a little zoomed in. As you can see, on here on the timeline view, these light gray bars represent the weekend, so each one of these is about a week. Say I start composing on the 8th, which is a Monday, and I need to be finished by the 19th, which looks like it's a Friday. Then if it needs to be recorded, maybe I need to hire an orchestrator or start working on those orchestrations. I plot that out in my timeline view. I've also added pages in case I need to prep for recording. That might take a day or two, and then spend time actually recording. Say it takes 3 days to record everything that I need. I also need to mix all that music. By the time it's all mixed and all put together, then it can be delivered. And if it's delivered, then I also added a finish project page, because sometimes the delivery doesn't mean that the project is done, but that's added out. Now, as you can see here, I have plotted out my entire process, and in order to make it to September 3rd, I guess, is when the project is to be finished. All of the music has to be delivered by the 28th. Then I have to adhere to this timeline. I'm sure you can see exactly how that's useful immediately, because you can see in a visual way how long something is going to take, how much time has already passed, and how much time there is allotted. This, for me, and I think for most people, that visual representation is so useful in a way that doesn't work as well if you're looking at it on a calendar or just written down on a piece of paper. This kind of chart is called a Gantt chart. If you haven't heard of that, it's exactly what this is. The different tasks that you have plotted out over the course of a period of time. This is how I recommend that you organize yourself through a project. But okay, you have your timeline view, you know how long it's going to take for you to do each step. What do you do when you're, say, in the composing phase? Well, here are a few tips that I find help me to keep myself productive, because I'm a natural procrastinator, I think, as most humans are. But this is how I keep myself on task and organized so that I can get everything finished quickly, at a high quality, and on time. I have three main ones. First is have a goal. Second is use a to-do list. Third is time block. All of these three things together will help you attack what needs to be done every single day so that you stay on track to finish by the time the project needs to be delivered. So let's break each one of these down. Firstly, have a goal. Now, I don't mean that the goal should be to get everything done. That's a given. But I mean, how do you break it down day by day? For example, you can have a daily goal. If you know you have 2 weeks to put together the entire score, then maybe each day, depending on the amount of cues that there are, you have a daily goal that you set for yourself. On day 1, you finish the second to longest cue of the day. Whichever one that is your goal for that day. That gives you a target to aim for, and you're more likely to achieve that goal if you know you need to get it done by the end of that day. Keep doing that day by day. Not only does it have to be day by day, but maybe it can be per cue. So for example, if you have a goal to sketch out the music for a cue that day, and you have another goal to orchestrate the music for that cue the next day, then that has 2 different things that you have to aim for in order to finish that cue. You see how that works? So next, using a to-do list. The brain is fantastic for coming up with ideas, but not for remembering all of them. If you have a few smaller things that need to get done, write that down and check them off as you finish them, because you will quickly find that when you're in the throes and you're writing, that you forget exactly what you needed to do. I've had this problem almost all my life of forgetting the things that I need to do. When I was in college, I generated this habit of using a to-do list. As soon as I thought of something that I needed to do, I wrote it down because I knew that I would forget it later. Then I had to build the habit of actually checking my to-do list, and once I cracked that, my productivity just went through the roof. Next up is time blocking. What is time blocking? It's very simple. Say you have an empty calendar like this one that I have on my screen, and you want to time block in a few hour intervals. So for example, you want to work from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Let's say this is writing block 1. Then you have a 30-minute break, writing block 2, another 30-minute break, writing block 3, another 30-minute break, writing block 4. So from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., you have 4 2-hour blocks in which to write music. Going back to the topic of having a goal and a to-do list at the same time, you can have a goal for, in these 2 hours, I want to have the scene mapped out with all of the markers and tempo changes and a preliminary sketch. Or maybe in the next 2 writing blocks, you have your full sketch, writing out the entire scene. Writing block 4, you get ready for the next day, for example. This is a concept that I learned from a mentor of mine, Trevor Morris, who has a fantastic YouTube channel and a fantastic video describing exactly this. He calls it 6 minutes a day. What he likes to do is per each of these 2-hour blocks, writing 2 minutes of music. With those 4 blocks, that gets you to 6 minutes of music a day. Will that get you 6 minutes of orchestral music a day? Probably not, but it scales down depending on the complexity of the cue that you're writing. The more complex might take you a little more time. The simpler, it might take a little less time, but it sort of evens itself out over time. So how does this look in practice? Let me show you, because I did this process on a project recently. So going back to our template here, one of the best things about Notion is that when you create a page, you can open it up and make new pages out of it. So even though I have this project timeline, each of these is called a page. I can click on composing and it'll open it up. Now here you can see that I sort of split it out over the course of a week. I had a few categories of things that I wanted to write down: writing, admin, and learning, which are 3 things that I think are important when you're a solopreneur, like a media composer is. Let's take a look at Wednesday here. I was writing a specific thing where I had to write a few different tracks. So my goal was to write 1 track per day. I wrote a to-do list out for what I had to complete in order to reach that goal, and I time blocked how much time it took to check each thing off my list. So check it out. I started at 9 a.m. Overall goal is to write the investigation theme. Now I had to write the first 2 sections on A, which were A and A prime, in the first 2-hour block. Then at 11:30, the next block was to write the B section. Then at the 2:30 block, I finished the investigation track. Maybe there's one more A section, but since I wrote the first 2 A sections at the beginning of the day, I have a lot of material to pull from, so it's a lot faster. And then I print the stems and am done with that track for that day. This workflow worked for me so incredibly well. I finished all of the tracks that I needed to do, I think in 2 weeks total, because that was about as many tracks as I had to write. So I utilized the 5 days out of the week to write 1 track at a time. The same thing the next day, right? Detective Alex theme, write the first 2 A sections, write the B section, write the last A section, finish out the track, and then print the stems. If you can have that for yourself every single day over the course of composing, then you will be shocked at how much work you can get done by just having those few things very clear for yourself. Putting in the little extra work at the beginning to think of what the goal is for the day. In my case, it was to write 1 track. The tasks that you need to do in order to achieve that goal, which is what the to-do list is for, and actually segmenting out the time that it takes in order to complete those tasks in order to meet the goal at the end of the day, which is what time blocking is all about. Now, you could be saying to yourself, well, that's great, Ernesto, but how do you ensure that you don't get writer's block or run out of ideas if you have all of this thing planned, but then you come to the end of the day and you didn't write anything because you didn't know what to write? That's a very valid concern, because humans are very prone to writer's block and feeling uninspired and not knowing what to do next, especially if you're a beginner or you don't do this sort of thing as a job. I came into a lesson with a teacher of mine once and came to him with this concern. I wasn't sure what to write next. I was stuck. I didn't write anything more than the last time we had seen each other. And what he said to me still sticks with me to this day. He said, "We're not building bombs." Now, what does he mean by that? What he meant was that this isn't a life and death situation. There aren't high stakes where it's imperative that I get it just right or I get it perfect. It isn't. You can always edit music afterwards, but you can't edit music that isn't there. The idea is to get out of your own head and not be too worried about whether what you're writing is the best thing that's ever been made or not. The thing to remember here is to keep working, no matter what. Just keep writing, even if you're stuck. If you just keep writing something, anything, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be the silliest, the worst thing that anyone's ever heard ever, but it's okay because no one else is going to hear it. Only you are listening to it. And even if you write just nonsense, that can project you into the next idea. You think, oh, well, maybe if I alter this note here and I alter this note there, then you have something to work with. That isn't something that just happens either. It's something that you practice and get better at over time. And that's been the case with me. I still am not perfect at just continuing to work even if I'm not inspired. And another thing with that "we're not building bombs" line is to just remember to have fun. Don't take it so seriously that you find yourself more stressed out than you are just enjoying writing music, which I think is a real privilege. Not everyone can do that, and we can. That's rare. So hopefully these tips have been helpful to you. Plotting out your project in a timeline view, for me, is just invaluable. If you want access to this template, then you can get it over at Patreon. And just remember, make a goal, make a to-do list, and then block out the time in order to reach those goals. So that's it for today's video. Comment down below what you think of these tips. If you have any of your own that help you stay productive and on task, then do let everyone know. Like the video if you liked it, don't if you didn't. And until next time, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Ernesto Composer. You can visit my Patreon at patreon.com/Ernesto Composer. You can get access to templates like this one, score study versions of my Polish pieces, score study Sunday hangouts, and many more goodies. You can visit my website at ernestocomposer.com. Thanks so very much for watching, and as always, take care.